Okay. Hello everyone, this is a text-to-speech adaptation from CounterYolo, bringing you another video of Star Trek Online. In today's video, I am going to go over the basics of the Temporal Recruit rerun, which is super good and important to do, the basic stats of the new legendary Miranda and Starship comparison sections per usual, and then go over the traits and consoles from this ship, including the one new Starship trait. A TLDW section will be at the end that you can skip to if you wish. Also, as normal, you can check the description or the time bar at the bottom of the screen if you wish to more easily skip around the video. About 30% of you skip around, which is okay. A PDF of this presentation, as well as the text version of this script, will be linked in the description. This video is text-to-speech after all, so is already written up for you all, though some of the spelling will be a little off, as to try to get the AI to pronounce things more correctly than otherwise. To start, in conjunction with the release of the legendary Miranda is the return of the Temporal Recruit rerun. This one is quite personal to me actually. I was quite busy in college at the time of the initial release of the Temporal Recruit, and missed making a TOS character for this first recruitment event by just 12 hours. Especially considering the number of reruns of the Delta recruitment event and the Gamma recruitment event, it made me a little annoyed that it took this long for this event to come back. The two biggest rewards are the reputation reward, as noted by Joe and Stowe, as well as the Starship trait, which is a fantastic filler Starship trait if you aren't going to get a lot of C-store/exchange starships for your builds. Participation in this recruitment rerun is just like other recruitment events. Start a new TOS era captain during the event parameters and finish the tutorial before the end of the event. The TOS tutorial used to be the longest tutorial of all the tutorials in the game, even longer than the Romulan one, but the devs noted they were changing it a bit, so it might not be as long anymore. Or, it might end up being longer if they decided to add silly time gates into the tutorial and or TOS missions. It's really hard to tell if they understand enjoyable game design anymore. Remember that you don't need to complete the full event in the time frame. I personally am doing an unfair difficulty playthrough of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous right now, so I plan to just start a TOS character on day 1 of the recruitment, and come back to it in a few weeks. Other Stowe YouTubers that want to farm views will have several different videos explaining the intricacies of this recruitment if you are curious about it. With that said, let's get to the meat of the video, the legendary Miranda. Per the discussion with the Clark 3 months ago, Cryptic Studios realized that standard cruisers are boring and don't sell at all anymore. However, they knew they wanted to sell more small vessels like the Miranda without needing to make them a frigate class, so they invented the multi-mission cruiser to give these small cruisers access to dual cannons and a hangar bay, and make them potentially interesting enough to the player base. Their cruiser commands are a little limited and less meant for tanking versus flight deck carriers, but you still can tank on these cruisers if you wish to. There are some inherent issues in the brief lore blog for the Starship, especially when E.C. Henry's 4-minute video easily explains why the Miranda is actually bigger than the original Constitution class in Rumass. The lore blog alludes that the Miranda logistically could be made with less resources, built faster, which is inaccurate. It is also for this reason that I am fine with the Miranda class having a hangar bay. It has more mass than the TOS Connie, so that's reasonable. Cryptic Studios, please rewatch E.C. Henry's video and fix the lore blog. I know you are a fan of his work, employing him as a consultant for several Stowe starships, so please just do that quick fix. Thanks. As for the new Miranda itself, beyond the inaccurately written lore, it has the base stats and maneuverability that we would expect from our older Miranda-class vessels. The difference obviously is that this is a 5 forward weapon, 3 rear weapon starship. Additionally, the specialization combination is full-spec temporal primary, with Lieutenant Commander Pilot secondary. As I will show later, Commander Temporal is rather common for TOS aesthetics and, frankly, boring. In the Clark video, aka the Miranda version 2, I noted that the older Fleet Reliant, if made today, would have been a full specialization pilot cruiser. As thus, I was expecting Commander Pilot with either Lieutenant Command Temporal or Lieutenant Commander Command seating. I was also expecting a more Pioneer-esque skin for this starship, considering the Pioneer bridge is Sam Witwer's favorite bridge in this game, and an actor invited to 10 Forward weekly after one Stowe stream, and later invited to voice a Discovery Klingon character after unfortunate circumstances arose. I guess celebrity wishes can't even influence what the Stowe devs end up doing in the game, only heavy complaining on the internet and making it trend can, so feel free to continue doing that. That all being said, I think the ship is still fine, because the developers, finally, put the Lieutenant Commander Specialist seat on the forced Lieutenant Commander Science seat. Many DPS builds do not like Science seating much at all, however, on this Starship at least these players have an option to replace some, or all, of these disliked Science abilities with pilot abilities, some of which are fine for really short ISE runs. Additionally, Lieutenant Commander tactical seating with an additional 2 universal seats means that this Starship can have 6 tactical abilities on it, opening up easy Polaron builds on her as well. Most energy-based starships with a Lieutenant Commander Science seat typically can't support 6 tactical abilities, while this one actually can. If you are going to use both temporal abilities and pilot abilities on this ship, really want to fly a TOS Miranda, or just really want the new Starship trait for its implications on the meta, those are all great reasons to pick this ship. If you plan to fly it like most temporal cruisers, via broadsiding, there are better and cheaper TOS aesthetic options available to do the same job. On this slide we have the 3 Tier 6 Mirandas in the game. As noted, if you want 6 tactical abilities and don't plan on using your temporal abilities, the classic Fleet Reliant will serve you the best with an extra base tactical console over the other variants. If you are okay with 5 tactical abilities and plan on tanking, the Fleet Malachowski, or Fleet Clark, will probably serve you better, unless you use pilot abilities in that forced Science seat. Also keep in mind that both the Fleet Reliant and the Fleet Malachowski are available from Tier 2 military, so these starships are functionally available to any active fleet you may be a part of in the game. As a result, unlike other legendary starships that have hard-to-access fleet options, the Miranda does not have that issue. The new Miranda does have 5 forward weapons, which is a nice bonus versus these starships though. Another great TOS tanking option is one that I frequently neglect on this channel, the Fleet Sagittarius, that has a TOS skin called the Gemini purchasable with dilithium. Unlike the legendary Miranda's 3 engines, this starship has 4 engines, 4 tactical consoles, and one of the best tanking survival consoles in the game via its Tier 6 C-Store Starship purchase, to place on the Fleet variant. It is basically the Fleet Malachowski, but replacing a hangar bay and command abilities with temporal abilities, an extra tactical console, and a really strong clicky console. I only ignore the Fleet Gemini so much because the C-Store Kronos Dreadnought Cruiser exists, which is basically the Fleet Gemini but with higher base stats, a hangar bay, and a better unique tanking console than what the Fleet Gemini has. Granted though, the Kronos aesthetic isn't for everyone, while the Gemini has a more palatable look for players, especially considering the feedback via emails I have received every time I say the Kronos is one of the best tanks in the game. The legendary Odyssey has a better tanking console set versus one strong console of the Kronos, but are both quite comparable otherwise. When it comes to TOS aesthetics, the original Enterprise will be high on the list. Most players that would be interested in this bundle, and have money to burn, will have already bought the original 10th Anniversary Legendary Bundle, including the legendary Miracle Worker Constitution class. This new Miranda needed to have some appeal over that account-unlocked starship, hence the 5 forward weapons for the legendary Miranda. At the same time, it couldn't overshadow the promo pack TOS Constitution, for players that aren't going to use torpedoes on that starship, hence the only 3 base tactical consoles on her with that hangar bay. I understand the justifications, but a full pilot spec starship would have just been interesting, or a full pilot spec on the legendary Constitution, as it is a light cruiser and had less mess than the Miranda. Overall, it's fine, and if you really want an iconic TOS cruiser but can't justify getting either TOS Connie in the game, this is a suitable replacement, especially for people asking for a single purchase TOS Connie. This is what your option really is right now. Now, for those of you that consider the Discovery Constitution close enough in aesthetics to the TOS Constitution for your liking, will really like the Discovery Constitutions a little more honestly. When the 10th Anniversary Legendary Bundle came out, I noted several times in that video, and several times in other videos as well, that I was really surprised just how powerful the developers let the legendary Discovery Constitution be for the player base. Comparing it to this new Miranda class, I see the Miranda as strictly inferior, unless you are really leaning in on using pilot abilities on the Lieutenant Commander Science seat for the starship. It has higher durability for the cost of a little maneuverability, the same tactical consoles and weapon layout, full temporal spec, but also an additional hangar bay over the new Miranda. There also is the promo pack Discovery Constitution, the auxiliary to battery variant of the legendary Discovery Constitution, but enough people talk about that Starship's strengths that I don't need to go into detail in this video on it. This next slide has some oddball TOS starships. The fleet Perseus, especially in modern STO, is just odd and outdated, but is at least maneuverable. The Atlas is pretty much the new Miranda with higher base stats, an extra tactical console, and a super strong unique console, usable on all starships, for the heavy cost of no primary specialization. Like the D9 and the Thray, you can make the Atlas work, but often builds won't use the specialization stuff on the Starship. Now this is probably the most interesting slide in this video. Many times in the past, I have said that the promo pack T-List was the most versatile and jack-of-all-trades starship in the game. Although that crown now goes to the uglier promo pack Courage class Science Destroyer, the ship is still formidable. It has the exact same specialization combination as the legendary Miranda, Commander Temporal plus Lieutenant Commander Pilot, but is also a tactical starship versus an engineering starship. With high maneuverability, an enhanced battle cloak and an extra tactical console over this new Miranda, this starship is not invalidated as a great starship in the game. They both approach battles differently, and I think that is great. I still wish the new Miranda had full pilot specialization, but anyways. These next slides are mainly for the PDF for reference, for the D7 battle cruisers as well as the fleet cruisers I just about always reference in these videos due to their budget and power. With starship comparisons out of the way, let's get into the traits and consoles in the bundle. As for the Reliance trait and console, they are showing their age in modern Star Trek Online. The console is mostly a PvP console, as the stats only help the PvP scene, and the debuff from the clicky console loses effectiveness when it hits multiple targets. The trait is an okay trait, as most energy builds nowadays use emergency power to engines, and this trait gives a weak shield resistance buff when using that ability, so a maneuverability ability doubles as a survival ability in your build. It's not terrible, but there are stronger options out there for sure. The Clark's trait and console are good and work in modern STO. Feel free to see that discussion in my Clark video about them. The new Miranda trait is definitely one that should shake up the DPS scene. The trait does two things for us. First off, it gives a permanent shield penetration for energy weapons while you are in combat. However, since you only need shield pen while you are in combat, this isn't that big of a deal. The more influential aspect of the trait is the taking shields offline of your target at the beginning of combat. Because the trait text mentions a moderate duration, we can already surmise its strength. For instance, the overpowered and overgunned trait from the legendary Defiant release about 18 months ago has a base duration of 5 seconds, and has text saying it is for a short duration. As long as the developers are consistent, which, admittedly, they may not be, this trait's moderate duration of shield offline should be meaningfully longer than a short duration of 5 seconds from popular precedent. Due to this, I am guessing this offline will last 8 to 10 seconds, which is more than enough for your high DPS scene in a map like ISE. Due to how strong the shield offline should be for the trait, the question becomes not if this will be meta for the high end, but who will be taking the trait. Clearly torpedo-only builds won't be, but it is up in the air for everyone else. If it has high shield penetration for energy weapons, then it will be a staple for energy-based DPS builds, beams and cannons. If it has inconsequential shield penetration on the trait, honestly fairly likely to be the case, then this will be a staple tanking trait, or a trait to put on a secondary DPS build that isn't going for a record run. Either way, expect this trait to start showing up in suggested builds on the STO Builds Reddit. In conclusion, we are getting a new 6000 Zen legendary starship in the game. This time it is the legendary Miranda with a third engine/deflector combo skin, and has all of the old Miranda skins and trait/consoles in it. It also has a level 65 boost in it as filler to justify the price that is forgettable like normal. It is a 5-forward weapon Miranda with a hangar bay and access to use dual cannons, with a full specialization temporal primary and secondary lieutenant commander pilot seat alongside it. I wish the ship was full pilot spec, as the original Tier 6 Miranda heavily implied in its bundle. The original developers of the ship wanted the ship to have full pilot specialization, but I guess that was vetoed in lieu of a boring full temporal specialization. In effectiveness, the ship works similarly to the TOS Constitution without torpedo support, or the TOS T-List with less maneuverability. The new Starship trait will likely affect the DPS scene with its moderate duration shield offline at the beginning of combat. It will depend on the shield pen stats as to whether DPS players take the trait or if it will be relegated to tanks. If you are a DPS chaser in this game, want to use a tier 6 TOS Starship on your Temporal Recruit, or just want a cheaper Starship akin to the TOS Constitution, with similar aesthetics, this is a decent bundle to get. It's a better value bundle than the Agents of Yesterday bundle, but not as good as the 31st Century 3 Starship bundle that is the same price as this legendary bundle on sale, but without any TOS aesthetics in it. In place of my normal rant on stuff at the end of the video, because I'm not actually talking, I will end this one with a fun PSA. In the TOS era, most starships typically are not usable because they aren't appropriate for the TOS era, including Discovery era starships. However, the recent cross-faction access thing from earlier this year? Yeah, that sort of broke it, in that once you finish the tutorial, most tier 6 starships are accessible to your captain, assuming you have a KDF captain at level 65. In my testing, event starships, MUD's market starships, legendary starships, and most C-store starships are all accessible once you finish the tutorial. I didn't test lobby, lockbox, and promo starships because I didn't bother with throwing away money. The only starships I couldn't use were Cardassian starships, Jem'Hadar Vanguard starships, though the standard Jem'Hadar starships were usable, and the C-store Titan Science Destroyer, not sure what's going on with that ship. Anyways, thanks for watching and tolerating text-to-speech while my voice recovers. There have been several of you all persistent that you would prefer text-to-speech over my actual stuttering and muttering, even though I feel most of the character in these videos would be lost, at least you all now know the difference and can judge accordingly. There should be a poll in the community section of the channel that you can go to and vote whether you prefer me speaking in these videos or not. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the temporal recruitment event.